Welcome to Decrypting IT, your go-to podcast for the latest tech trends and insights. Together, we'll break down everything from cybersecurity to managed services and cloud solutions. Whether you're an IT pro or just tech curious, we're here to share expert advice, real success stories, and actionable tips from our team, partners, and clients. Let's simplify technology, spark innovation, and navigate the ever-changing IT world together. Welcome to another episode of Decrypting IT. I'm your host, Ashley Wallace, Client Success Lead here at Catalyst Network Group. Today, we're going to be discussing the top 3 cybersecurity trends and threats covering ransomware-as-a-service, zero trust adoption, and AI-powered threats, all which continue to be ever-evolving in this landscape we're in today. We want you to leave today's episode with next steps on how you can continue to ensure your organization is prepared and also where you can go for help doing so. On with me is our expert, Chuck Flynn, from our cybersecurity partner and our MSSP, Foresight Cybersecurity. Chuck is a principal security solution architect at Foresight Cybersecurity with over 20 years of hands-on experience in information security. He specializes in managed detection and response, security operations, so our SOC, and proactive threat management. As a recognized cybersecurity thought leader, Chuck helps businesses combat ransomware, AI-driven attacks, and compliance challenges. His expertise in vulnerability management and penetration testing ensure organizations stay ahead of these emerging threats. We're so excited to have you on, so thank you so much for joining me today, Chuck. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ashley. Glad to be here.
Of course. So I wanted to get started and just dive first into our ransomware as a service. So let's just start off with talking about what exactly is ransomware as a service and how has it evolved in more recent years? I know it's just obviously the cybersecurity landscape is continually ever evolving, but more recently, how do you feel like it's evolved?
So yeah, that's an interesting one. Ransomware as a service has kind of evolved into, think of it more like a franchise operation. Anyone can go out on the dark web or find the right website to actually buy a ransomware kit and deploy it themselves.
Oh.
And that exposes things like double exposure, double ransomware. But what really happens is somebody can just hire someone to go out there, create the kit, download the kit, push it out there, do their ransomware. And some of these platforms, in these back-end platforms, they support things like customer service numbers to make phone calls, to ask for help. They support dashboards. They're giving them even trending analysis for which ones are working better and not working, right? And they've also got where they're even including encryption keys in the initial payload. So you don't even have the ability to catch it a lot of times until it's actually starting to encrypt.
Oh, wow, that's pretty scary. That being the case, how are our companies defending themselves against these like new tactics, so to speak?
So it relies on a couple of models, right? The whole defense in depth or security layers. And that really means we need to look at as much controls and strong protections as we can on the edge. But we have to realize every single device is now an edge. So if you have access to your corporate environment on your phone, that phone is now an edge. If you have access to it on your laptop from home, that laptop is now an edge. So you're no longer living inside the wall. You're actually at the gate every step of the way. And one of the ways we've seen that helps is a really, really strong set of protections. And that's going to include a good endpoint detection response type of tool on the endpoint. It's going to include really strong protections around least privilege access, right? So even if I do get, or the user does get compromised, how far can that person get before they run into other infrastructure roadblocks? Instead of once one person gets compromised, everything's available, right? So the idea is use multiple defenses in depth.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more what least privilege access is?
Sure, that's kind of moving toward the zero trust framework.
Okay, perfect. So so when we go and talk about zero trust, that's one of the ways that you can kind of mitigate some of these ransomware as a service attacks is through the zero trust adoption.
Not so much mitigate as prevent.
Got it.
So the idea is the endpoint might get compromised, but that endpoint can't get to the database without re-authentication, or can't get to the back end file share without re-authenticating. That's how zero trust works. You have to authenticate at every level again and over, and you can do it with certificates and things like that. So it's not really impactful, but it still prevents the ransomware machine from being able to push its stuff through the network.
Okay, awesome, great. That's good to know. So kind of circling back to ransomware as a service and just how it's evolved, what industries do you feel like are targeted the most? Is it everyone or anyone? Are there any specific industries or The other follow-up to that is, have you seen an increase in smaller organizations being attacked with ransomware?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, it's everywhere. With the rise of these toolkits and the ease
Mm-hmm.
of downloads those toolkits, everybody can send it everywhere, so everybody gets flooded with these threats.
Geez.
However, SMB space, the small medium business space, is usually more vulnerable, and they're getting hit more and more often because now that you're looking for, small payouts across a large area, you're going to get a lot more back from that. So the attackers or malicious actors, instead of saying I have to get into X big giant company, I can get into 10 small companies and make the same amount of money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In the SMB space, they don't have the same infrastructure or the same budgets or the ability to have
Right.
the same tools, and they're a bit more vulnerable in many cases.
That makes sense, unfortunately, right? We just talked about why small businesses are targeted more often. That's why we're also seeing, would you agree that we're seeing just an overall increase in cybersecurity attacks is because the way that they're targeting small business versus just going for these huge corporations that may have all these additional measures in place, whereas the small businesses don't, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Small businesses are going to be targeted a lot more because it's easy to grab that kit and just push it out to as many targets as you can.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's scary kind of world. I don't want to want to scare people, but at the same time, it's good to understand these things and to have that knowledge so that we can work to understand how we can protect the organization. So appreciate that. What do you think are the most common entry points? You mentioned, I think when we talk about entry points, and you're referring to like endpoints, right? So laptops, phones are now can be compromised and be an entry point for attackers. What do you think is the most overlooked by businesses normally?
Well, that's hard to say. I would say awareness training is probably very key because, again,
Mm-hmm.
a person is now an edge, and each person has a device and they have access to email, which means they
Yep.
have the ability to be hit with a barrage of different phishing scams, whether it's something sending over your email where you have to click a link or an
Mm-hmm.
attachment, or if it's a pretend invoice or a pretend refund. And then you have the rise in voice phishing as well, or SMS phishing as well, right? So people are getting
Yep.
inundated from all of that from all directions. So the biggest, I guess, avenue is typically still going to be through the person, through the human being, but it could come from their phone, it could come from their laptop, it could come from their tablet, wherever they happen to be using it for work, and click on the wrong link. We have people that bring your own device to work, right? So you have your laptop or you have your iPad, and you bring it, and you have all your corporate stuff on it, and then
Yep.
on Saturday afternoon, you're giving it to your kid to go, watch movies or play games on it because it's your personal device. You just also happen to use it for work. And sometimes, that 6-year-old might get a pop up and click a button, and then it just goes from there as well. So that edge is really at the human being level.
Yeah, and that's so hard to influence individual behaviors. So the way that you're suggesting organizations help to protect themselves against, that avenue would be, like you mentioned, user training. When you're talking about that, are you talking about a platform like Know Before? What else is out there that Foresight also? I know you guys offer that too. I forget the name of the service, but it's similar to Know Before. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a competitor of Know Before, and there's more than just two of them out there. There's plenty of them. The
Yep,
one we use is called Breach Secure Now is the one we use.
that's it. Okay,
And it works
great.
just well, and it gives you the ability to do the yearly training you have to do, and then it gives you the ability to do micro training every single week. Or you can even host a phishing campaigns where you're sending out your own phishing emails and you're letting the people fall for it, and then you're having a conversation to show them you could have looked for this, or
Testing them.
yeah, what are the in this email that said it should have been a bad idea to click on that link. So a
It's a
lot.
gotcha, right? Like we got you on that one. They are getting a lot more sophisticated, I feel like, in nature as well. And so, it's you really have to be, you really have to be on it. I know I've seen some come across and it really makes you sit there and think for a minute. It's not just as simple. I feel like they used to be, easy to detect, and I feel like it's just becoming a lot harder. Would you say that also, the phishing attempts are using AI to evolve?
Yeah, they
So
absolutely
that
are. I mean, the malicious actors, they're going to use all the tools and all the technologies at their disposal to make their job easier. And
Yep.
again, they're only looking for even a 1 or 2% success rate, and that's considered a highly successful business for them. So we have to be right 100% of the time to prevent that. And they're using AI tools. They're using some tools these days, which actually you can target somebody, tell it to go look at all the things that they've written, and then help you create the message that was most likely to get them to click, right?
Wow.
And you're not going to have much spelling mistakes. You're not going to have the typical weird different links and emails and stuff like that. They're able to do that really, really, really well with AI. And they're even able to craft the messages that very much speak to the person they're targeting. So you feel really comfortable reading it and you almost want to click that link. So yeah, they're getting really, really good at that.
Yeah. So, how often would you say is appropriate for companies to have this training go out to their employees? What's
I'm,
recommended in the space?
I'm a big proponent of having some kind of a weekly micro training that goes out there where it's like 3 or 4 minutes at a time. So once a week, you get a 3 or 4 minute little little commercial type thing to watch. And then you have three or
Hmm.
four questions to ask a couple questions. A big proponent of doing that on a weekly basis as part of your overall security program. That way, it keeps people not just aware and educated, but slightly on edge, never knowing when a test is coming, but know there's going to be one once a week. They're more
Yeah,
likely to be
top of
critical of
mind.
the other email they get.
That makes sense. Okay, great. Yeah, definitely. I think when you have that awareness, it's always going to be that top of mind. So that makes a lot of sense. You want to do that on a more frequent basis. So thanks for that. The other question I had around just how easily cyber criminals are able to, launch these ransomware attacks. I've heard, rumor has it, is that, even people with little technical expertise could actually launch these attacks. Have you ever seen that or in your time?
Yeah, and that goes right back to the franchise model, right? Anybody can just, if you find, I mean, you have to find your way to that part of the dark web, right? But you find your way to the dark web, you're going to be able to hire someone to do it for you, or hire someone to write you some piece of code that allows it to happen. Now, granted, a
That's
lot of times
wild.
you're buying it, you're paying for it, you're doing ransomware, but the actors that are doing that are still going to, double extort the person that's happening. So they're going to get copies of it as well, not just you. The whole idea of you can't really trust who you're buying it from anyway, even though you're buying something to do something, malicious with.
Right. Right. Yeah, just definitely working with a criminal there. So what can you expect, right? And then how are law enforcement agencies and the government in general responding to this shift, this increase in cyber attacks altogether?
Well, at the federal level, they've set up many things to allow you to report it and work with them to find information. If you're a large company and you get ransomware and everything's encrypted, a lot of people are saying never call the authorities, right?
Mm,
However, the authorities do keep a database of any encryption they've come across where the keys have been provided. So you might find that when they have one of the keys out of work and you're right back up and running.
oh,
A lot
that's
of
great.
times, yeah, and beyond that, as assistance with it, the way they're managing their systems is going to be pretty much the same way we're recommending everybody else. You have to do dimension or layers of security, defense in depth. You have to
Hmm.
make a strong endpoint, least privileges. You probably want to ensure that your users don't have admin rights on the local machine anyway. That way they can't install things or run certain things. And then you want to have a really good EDR tool that's reporting its logs back in. You want to make sure your security program includes some form of centralized logging and analysis of those logs in conjunction with authentication records, web browsing history, firewall logs, IPS logs. Think about all the telemetry in the environment. You want to
Yeah,
bring all that together to allow a good back-end SIM to review all that and use its back-end AI and machine learning to start popping out things that are a little bit strange or a little bit beyond what the normal is. That
those
way,
anomalies, those different detections, and those eventually they'll respond to those events and create tickets and so on and so forth for analysis. Okay, that's great. And then just for those who may not know, let's kind of talk about EDR, what that entails. So, and endpoint detection, right?
yeah, endpoint detection response is kind of the next generation of antivirus, right? They're calling the next gen antivirus, but it's really
Mhm.
endpoint detection response. And what that is, it's an agent that installs on each person's endpoint, including phones and tablets. And it's constantly looking at every piece of traffic and activity that happens on there. And when it finds things that are either known to be bad because we have signatures and we have certain behaviors that are known to be bad, it'll flag it and send a report somewhere. Most of them have the ability to also block activity before it happens. As an example, if in my environment we see an attachment come through to a customer that was full of ransomware or some other virus, well, we fingerprint that piece and we give it we find out what its fingerprint is, and then we load that fingerprint into the EDR tools so nobody else in that environment can even run it. That way it's prevented from running, even if it's on the endpoint. It doesn't get the ability to run or to execute.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, I think I've recently seen a customer who had a file download that was blocked, and we reported on that. So that's great. I'm sure you see those every day, right? Quite literally, yeah. It's constantly happening. That's for sure. Okay, great. And then I was gonna ask how how Foresight or MSSP, excuse me, helps businesses detect and respond to ransomware or threats in real time. So we just talked about that. I think for the most part, EDR. Is there anything else I'm missing there?
I would say really missing, but I would say we can reiterate the idea that with the MSSP, you're going to have that 24/7 eyes on screen. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have the collection and correlation across all your different technology and security technology logs, as well as the fact that you have seasoned professionals that do this every day, 24/7, watching these screens, looking at these logs, looking at these alerts, and helping determine what the response is. And then with most of these tools, we have the ability as an MSSP to also take action. So we can actually go out there and isolate a client when we see something happening before it spreads. Or we can go out there, isolate a client, and ban a file hash. And if we know there's a known command and control server it's talking to, we can go to the firewall and block that as well. So we can keep the entire environment safe while people are still sleeping in bed.
Good, good to know. We haven't talked yet about any governance framework assessments or anything in that area. How do you feel like that helps with the just overall protection of the business? And I don't know if it's necessarily in regard to ransomware attacks per se, but let's talk a little bit about the governance framework assessments there.
Sure. So the idea behind that is the National Institute of Technology, NIST, puts
Mm-hmm.
out certain standards that they recommend. There's one framework called 853. It's a big overarching framework for non-governmental entities for security. It's a lot of work, right? It's almost 800 or so different controls and subcontrols. And they also have a lighter version of that called the cybersecurity framework, which is known as NIST CSF. And that
Okay.
is typically a really good foundational start to approaching security. It's going to walk through, I think it's 108 controls. It's going to look
Okay.
at the controls. It's going to look at some of the governance. It's going to make sure you have the right policies in place, the right procedures in place, as well as the controls themselves. And most MSSPs, if they have a GRC practice, they'll have the ability to do an assessment with you. So they can walk through the assessment, they can collect the artifacts, they can tell you where your gaps are, and they can make recommendations for which gaps to fill first and to how. And the point of all this is creating that defense in depth model. So you don't just have a firewall on the edge, but you have a firewall, you have GPO limitations, you have zero trust or critical infrastructure, and then you're also going to have EDR on the endpoint. So you're able to have lots of different points where you're going to be able to catch or block or prevent something. And those frameworks really give you a nice organized way to map toward all those different pieces, all within one framework.
Mm-hmm. And how often, so let's say you've got a framework in place, how often do you need to evaluate that? I mean, especially when we're considering how these threats and continue to change and just evolve. We've mentioned that a couple of times now. What would you suggest for reviewing that framework and making sure that you're continuing to be protected?
Yeah, so typically, I mean, it used to be a 3-year cycle where you would update it every 18 months, but that's kind of changed with how fast things are changing now. So now
Mm-hmm.
you do a full assessment and create that roadmap. And depending on where your maturity level is, you might create about a 24-month roadmap to go from where you were at the assessment time to where the industry average wants you to be. And then you want to kind of look at that and update that probably at least once a year because technology changes, lots of things change all the time, and they're changing faster and faster now. So what we usually do is we want to do an assessment, then we want to come back after about the first year and do an update to that assessment and make any tweaks where necessary so that program keeps moving along in the most efficient manner toward that target goal.
Great. Would you suggest, in most instances, working with somebody like ourselves at Catalyst and Foresight is going to be the best way to, uh, you know, move that forward and make sure that we're checking all the boxes in those areas? It sounds like a heavy amount of work. You want to make sure that nothing's missed. So unless you've got, significant in-house expertise, is that what your recommendation would be? Is to find a partner to work with?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you absolutely want a partner to work with unless you have a GRC staff in place. Again, if you're one of the very large Fortune 200 companies, you have staff for all this stuff, you're probably managing all this stuff very, very well. If you're not one of those big, large companies, you're going to need to find expertise that can
Yep.
help you that same level of awareness and approach without having to hire that same level of staff. And that's where partners, whether it's Catalyst or Foresight, sometimes we work in conjunction with each other. We can bring that expertise to you and give
Yeah.
you that same output. And we're going to have our staff are all the same certified level, industry recognized people who've been doing this for years. And we can bring that to you in more of an ad hoc mode that gives you what you need when you need it. And we can come back every 6 months or a year to help refresh it as well.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure people have, no, they're not alone. They're not alone out there. There's definitely help and ways to make sure they're protected. So appreciate that. Let's move on to the zero trust adoption. So let's talk about zero trust, what that really means, and why that's becoming a top priority for organizations.
So again, yeah, zero trust is really making a lot of headway these days because it's the model, and again, it's a framework, but it's the model of not trusting everybody. It's how they usually put it. It's I can't remember the word. It's really, I trust you, but I'm going to verify it every time anyway, right? Trust but verify might be a way to
Yep.
put it. But the
Yep.
idea is, okay, you've logged in, and that's terrific. So you have access to the VPN, but now you want access to the database server. Yeah, you're using single sign-on, but I'm still going to verify it. That might be through a multi-factor. It might be through checking, the network route and the different gateways are all the same as always been, so we can automate that as well. But it could also
Mhm.
turn around and say, hey, you know what? You're not even supposed to have access to this. Why are you asking for it? With zero trust, you're checking at every point, you're checking to make sure you still should have access to what you're asking for and that you are still you.
Great, great, great. And that's changed a little bit as the dynamic, this remote workforce has increased. You feel like that's changed zero trust adoption or increased zero trust adoption methodology?
I do. I believe it's actually increased or brought enough awareness to the back end people that we need to use zero trust because now people are
Mhm.
working from coffee shops or from their house or from whatever. And the fact that the edge is being pushed further and further out to the user, the idea of zero trust is even, it comes up more and more times because everybody realizes somebody gets in a wrong Wi-Fi in a coffee shop and my entire network is now exposed. So zero trust is the perfect answer to that because you're going to verify and
Great.
validate.
Great to mention also, I feel like there are so many people that travel these days, traveling for work, maybe even traveling out of the country where they may not have secure Wi-Fi. That's going to leave them more vulnerable, right, at those points.
Absolutely. If you're traveling out of the country, my specific advice is typically leave your computer and your work computer back at the office, take a fresh build and do everything over VPN. That way
Good
you're,
advice.
you're
Yeah.
logging into a Wi-Fi, you're connecting a VPN, that's going to be a secure tunnel back to where you're going. And then you remote into a remote machine and do all your work that way. That way you're least likely to have to worry about it. Not to mention, many times when we go through customs in certain countries, they take all of our electronics for, they call it inspection. But we don't know if
Mm-hmm.
they're mirroring it or cloning the hard drive or what they're doing that when they take it back in the back room, right? So you want to make sure anything
Didn't
you
think
bring
about
back
that.
to the country doesn't have any kind of confidential critical information on it, and everything you need to do, you should be able to do using that VPN model.
That's great advice. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. I'm just trying to think of a real world example to give people where implementing that zero trust prevented, like how does it prevent an attack necessarily? Can you help me think of something along those lines?
Well, a lot of times you'll see that around, or what we're seeing really is when someone is working remotely, they log in remotely, and something else on their network has access to that device, and they kind of use it as a multi-home device or like a bridge. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's going to ferret through that connection and start going through the environment it finds. A lot of times it's like the OneDrive files or the SharePoint files or the Google Drive files or whatnot. And the idea would be that as that other connection is happening, it's going to be checked and validated the same way your laptop was. And if it doesn't have the same certificates or the same authentication, it's not allowed to access that. A pop-up will show up saying you need to have a password. At the same time, the users, again, zero trust is really limited trust, right? You only have access to what you need to do. So if you need access to the marketing materials, when you're on the VPN, you have marketing material access, but you can't access financials. You can't access certain databases. You can't access certain information. And you can set your policies to behave differently if you're coming in from the remote side versus from the trusted network. So when you're on
Okay.
the trusted network, you might be able to access all those other pieces we talked about. But when you're remote, you might be limited to just things that are not super confidential that if they got out or got locked up, it wouldn't shut you down. Right? So you can
Right.
actually also minimize that through policy while using zero trust as a model.
And if people are looking for help to adjust those policies, again, it sounds like just like a lot of work that needs to be done on the back end to make these configuration changes. How can we help an organization to ensure that those policies are in the right place?
There's a couple ways we can help, right? Depending on the management of the infrastructure, if you have an MSP as an example, managing your infrastructure, a lot of that would fall to them to make sure it's configured and appropriate. If you're doing it yourself or you're a small company, that's where those framework assessments come in. That's where the GRC governance people come in to help, because they can come in, they can look at it, they can help you structure it, they can help you set up with professional services, set up all these rules and do all this work for you, and then teach you how to kind of maintain it, as well as if we can work with the MSSP, you're going to be sending the logs over there. So while Zero Trust gets set up and it's kind of self-sustaining within the client or within the company, we're still going to get those logs. We're still going to look for anomalies. We're still going to pass that through our analytics engine to tell them this behavior is risky, and we see other behavior like this leads to bad things, right? So we're still going to constantly give you feedback on any updates or changes you want to make as well.
Okay, great. Great. Let's move on to AI powered threats and defense. This is a good topic. I'm excited because, it's everywhere. Like AI in every organization, I feel like is starting to use it, and it's going to continue to just transform the way that threats are, like we mentioned with the ransomware, how they're becoming more sophisticated. So we talked about ransomware, but are there other attacks that they're leveraging AI?
Absolutely. Ransomware happens to be one payload of the attack. They're using AI to generate bots. They're using AI these days to go out there and look at how certain people talk when they give speeches, and then create a voice type of model so they can use that to pick up the phone and call somebody and do phone phishing, and it sounds exactly like the person that they're pretending to be, all the way down to their different speaking style and how they use specific words, right? So the AI model allows them to completely replicate that, while at the same time, you have your AI and you take we're not talking about like the Chat GPTs of the world that are publicly cloud hosted. We're talking about the one you can download and run locally. You take those down locally, you don't have the same protections that you're going to get that prevents like Chat GPT from writing code. So you're able to take those AI models, you're able to feed it in all the information you want about different technology or different types of source code or different types of programming languages, and ask it to write programs for you. And then you can run those programs, and it's going to be able to pivot very, very fast against the blocks that they're finding on the network. So you're hitting a firewall and you're trying, 25 different things, as a typical hacker might do.
Yep.
You put an eye on it and ask it to go hit that firewall, it could try 25,000 different models in the same amount of time, but it just keeps hammering and hammering and hammering. And of course, with the AI model, every time it finds something, it learns something, it will pivot and it will keep expanding.
Wow.
And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're watching for.
Right. And so that's just, that's pretty interesting, because I feel like that just makes it even harder to defend against, obviously. So how are businesses now? I mean, I know it's kind of new and evolving, right? So especially in the AI world and with these specific attacks, what are the best ways to mitigate those at this point?
So there's a couple pieces there. The best way to see them and recognize them, again, is to also engage in using some of the AI and the machine learning and analytics to take the output of all the sensors we're seeing. So while the AI might be hammering a firewall, that firewall is generating logs for each one of those attempts,
Yeah.
bringing those logs, bringing all that different telemetry back into a AI powered or machine learning powered SIM, or, and I believe the term UBA gets thrown out there a lot too, right? User behavior analytics, bringing all that together into an AI model SIM. It's going to allow that SIM to figure out what's happening almost as fast as it's happening. So we have the ability to see it and respond and put, more blocks up and whatnot. However, it also leads into the need for that defense in depth. So
Yeah.
while you might have a good EDR tool on the edge, you might have, for the users, you might have on your servers, you might have UBA on the network or NBA on the network to look and see what's happening on the network, what's unique, what's not unique, what's new. But you're also going to have the ability to do threat hunting to see known bad actors, because the odds of being one of the first people targeted by stuff like this is pretty low, because it runs across the world. So we're able to learn accuracy in other places and apply that behavior to our models here. Again, it's how that SIM comes into place to see it happening first, to recognize it quickly when it happens.
Yeah, it's almost like AI against AI, right?
Unfortunately, I do think it's going to go that way, but for now, we're still in the
The AI of the attack against the AI defense, right? So that's good to know that we are using AI in a defense strategy to be able to deal with those. So that's good to hear and know. Let's see. It also is AI reduces alert fatigue. I think you've mentioned that to me before around like filtering false positives.
Yeah, the idea is if you're monitoring just the output of a tool, you're going to get every message it has, right? But if you're sending it through machine learning algorithms, it's going to filter out the noise and tell you what you really have to pay attention to. And that's also where a good MSSP comes into play, because they also help comb that out to get rid of the noise and help to continual tuning to lower that amount of noise. So when you get an alert, you know it's a real alert and there has to be some kind of action taken. Action is urgently needed. Sometimes it's needed, within a week. You want to make sure you do certain patches or configuration changes, depending on the priority or the severity of the alert. And that's again where the MSSPs come in to help you, because we're going to help triage that for you and give you not just the output of what we know is legitimate, but we're going to help temper that to what's truly urgent versus not urgent.
Great. That's awesome. Okay. And just so I think we can wrap up with, we've covered, most everything. Do you feel like there's anything around the AI side? I think we spent a little bit less time in that area, but do you feel like there's anything there that you want to point out that we didn't cover?
I think we covered a lot. I would say again, the big message from me is defense in depth, follow a good solid framework, and take advantage of either the really good strong SIMs, if you have that 24/7 type of a SOC operations that can monitor it, or take advantage of the partners and the MSSPs out there that can bring the value of 24/7 people watching it and responding, that do this every day, instead of just adding more burdens to some of your IT staff that have enough burdens already. The idea is prevention step, defense in depth, a good solid framework alignment, and good solid monitoring, and that should be enough.
No matter the size of your organization, right? That's a big takeaway. Just because you're small doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to you. In fact, you may be actually more targeted, right? Is a good takeaway from this.
Absolutely. A lot of malicious actors look for what they call the supply chain. Right. So you might.
Great. And I know we have the ability to help help in all those areas. So regardless of the, like, again, I said the size of the organization, we have services that can help protect those companies in all sizes. So I wanted to leave everybody with that. Any other takeaways from today? Let's see, we talked about making sure it's essential that you partner with somebody on the frameworks. We can even provide that resources to NIST in case, anybody wants to go search that up. And that's available just through search online, right? I think you can find that NIST. What was the 800? .gov. Perfect. So we leave that as a resource. And then, of course, if any help around the planning and institution of an EDR, managed detection and response, all the services that you can provide there at Foresight, we can reach out to Catalyst and Foresight and get started in discovery there and get a plan in place. So sounds good. Anything from your side that we would want to cover in addition to what we already have? Great. I hope that everybody has a good idea on where to go from here. And with the closing out, we just appreciate everybody joining for the episode of Decrypting IT today, where we're helping you go further, faster, and safer in the world of cybersecurity, cloud data, and managed solutions. If you found today's discussion valuable, don't forget to hit subscribe and give it a share. If you have a hot topic you'd like us to cover, welcome all the suggestions. Please reach out to us at podcast@catalystng.com. Until next time, stay secure and stay ahead. Thanks, Chuck.